There is a moment most people have had, a moment where something was hard, genuinely hard, not hard in the way that eventually becomes easy with enough effort, hard in the way that made you wonder whether the effort was ever going to be enough. And in that moment, a thought arrived. Maybe this is just not for me. Maybe I am not built for this. Maybe the people who are good at this were always going to be good at it, and I was always going to be someone who was not. That thought felt like an observation, like a factual reading of the situation, like the honest conclusion of someone being realistic about their limitations. It was not an observation, it was a belief. And that belief, which felt like clarity, was actually the single most limiting thing you could have told yourself in that moment. Because it was not true, not in the way you thought it was true, not as a fixed fact about your ceiling, as a signal about your current state, about where you were in the process, not about where the process ended. The difference between those two readings of that moment is the difference between two entirely different lives. One life that is shaped by what you currently are, and another life that is shaped by what you are in the process of becoming. That difference has a name, and understanding it is the most significant thing you can do for the version of your life that is still available to you. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Your abilities are not fixed. This is not motivational language. It is one of the most well-supported findings in the psychology of human development. The brain is not a static structure. It does not arrive at a certain capacity and stay there. It is plastic, changeable, responsive to experience in ways that are more profound and more persistent than most people understand. When you learn something difficult, when you practice something that challenges you, when you struggle with something and keep going anyway, the brain physically changes. New neural connections form. Existing pathways strengthen. The capacity to do the thing expands, not because you were always capable and just unlocked the potential, because you built capability that was not there before. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The person who is good at mathematics is not someone who was born with a mathematics brain. They are someone who spent enough time working through mathematical difficulty that the brain built the architecture to support it. The person who communicates with clarity and confidence is not someone for whom this came naturally. They are someone who put themselves in enough situations that required communication that the brain built the networks to support it. The skill looks natural from the outside. From the inside, it was built, one difficult, imperfect, effortful repetition at a time. And the belief about whether that building is possible is the thing that determines whether a person ever begins building. But here is what you are missing about how this belief actually operates. It does not feel like a belief. It feels like a fact. And that is what makes it so powerful and so limiting. The person with a fixed mindset who believes that abilities are essentially set does not experience that belief as an opinion they hold. They experience it as a truth they are observing. When something is hard, they observe that they are not good at it. When someone else is better, they observe that that person has something they do not. When they fail, they observe that failure as evidence of their ceiling rather than their current position. These feel like readings of reality. They are readings filtered through a belief that has become so deeply held it has merged with perception itself. The fixed mindset does not say, "I believe my abilities are limited." It says, "I can see that my abilities are limited." And seeing feels inarguable in a way that believing does not, which is why changing the mindset is not a matter of deciding to believe something different. It is a matter of understanding at a level deep enough to change perception that what felt like observation was actually interpretation, that the data was real, the conclusion was not, that struggling with something tells you where you are, not what you are capable of becoming. Here is where it gets specific, because the fixed mindset and the growth mindset are not just philosophical positions. They produce completely different behaviors, and those behaviors produce completely different lives. The fixed mindset person avoids challenges, not because they are lazy, because challenges are threatening. If your self-concept is built on being capable, on being someone who is good at things, then challenges are situations where that self-concept is at risk, where you might find out, in public, public that you are not as capable as the self-concept requires. The avoidance is not a failure of ambition. It is a protection of an identity that is built on a fragile foundation. The identity says, I am someone who is good at this. The challenge says, let us find out. And the finding out is dangerous, because if the finding out reveals inadequacy, the identity is damaged, and so the challenge is avoided, or attempted with one foot already out the door, or abandoned at the first sign of difficulty, not because the difficulty was insurmountable, because the difficulty was proof enough. The growth mindset person has a different relationship with challenges, not because they enjoy difficulty, because the challenge is not threatening to their identity. Their identity is not built on being good at things. It is built on working at things, on the process, on the effort, on the willingness to be in the learning stage of something rather than requiring themselves to already be in the mastery stage. So when the challenge arrives, instead of asking, am I good enough for this? They ask, what does this require of me? And that question is answerable. It does not threaten the identity. It directs the energy toward the specific skills that need developing, the specific knowledge that needs building, the specific practice that the challenge is calling for. And the person who asks that question and then does the work discovers something the fixed mindset person never gets to discover, that the challenge was not a ceiling, it was a beginning. Now, here is the thing about failure that most people never fully understand. Failure means something completely different depending on which mindset is processing it. For the fixed mindset, failure is identity. You failed at the thing. The failure is evidence about you, about your capability, about your ceiling, about what you are and are not able to do. And evidence about identity is a verdict. Verdicts are not revisited. They are accepted and lived by. The person with a fixed mindset who fails at something important does not experience it as a moment in a process. They experience it as a revelation of something they perhaps always suspected about themselves. And the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next situation where trying might lead to failing is approached with more of the self-protective caution that failing the last time confirmed was justified. For the growth mindset, failure is information, specific, direct, irreplaceable information about the current gap between the skill that exists and the skill that is required. The failure says, here is where the capability is not yet sufficient. Here is what needs to develop. Here is the specific area where the next round of effort should be directed. The failure is not a verdict. It is a diagnostic, and diagnostics are useful. They tell you where to work with a specificity that success cannot provide, because success confirms that what you did was sufficient, but it does not tell you what would have made it excellent, or what specific thing you did correctly that should be repeated. Failure tells you with painful clarity what did not work, and what did not work is information about what to do differently. The growth mindset person processes that information and returns, not with the same approach that failed, with the approach that the failure's information suggested, adjusted, informed, more capable than they were before the failure, because the failure provided the data the success could not. Here is the midpoint truth. Talent is not the starting point. Effort is. This is the most counterintuitive piece of the growth mindset, and the most important, because the culture most people grew up in told them the opposite. Talent was celebrated. The person who did something well immediately was admired. The person who struggled was identified as someone who was not built for it. And the message, absorbed from this cultural environment, was clear. The people who are good at things have the talent for those things. And if you do not have the talent, the effort is futile. This is almost completely backwards. Here is what the research actually shows. The people who become genuinely excellent at something are almost universally the people who worked at it the longest and with the most deliberate intention, not the most talented people, the most persistent, the most willing to stay in the uncomfortable stage where they were not yet good, to keep working when the improvement was not visible, to use the feedback that the difficulty provided rather than retreating from it. Talent, to the extent it exists in the way most people imagine, provides an early advantage. It does not determine the ceiling. The ceiling is determined by the willingness to work, and the willingness to work is determined by the belief belief about whether the work can produce something, which means the mindset is prior to the outcome, not parallel to it. Prior, the mindset determines whether the work happens. The work determines whether the capability develops. The capability determines the outcome. Change the mindset and you change everything downstream of it. Let us talk about praise, because this is where the mindset gets installed in most people, and understanding how it was installed is part of what makes it possible to reinstall differently. Research in this area produced one of the most surprising and important findings in developmental psychology. The way you praise children and the way you were praised shapes the mindset they develop, and the effect is dramatic. Children praised for their intelligence, for being smart, for being naturally good at something tend to develop a fixed mindset. Why? Because the praise that says you are smart places the identity on being smart, and being smart is a fixed quality. You either are or you are not. So when a challenge arrives, when something is hard, when the effortless performance that smart people are supposed to demonstrate is not available, the child is in crisis. The difficulty is threatening, not because the challenge is too hard, because struggling is not what smart people do. And if I am struggling, maybe I am not as smart as I was told. And the response to that threat is the fixed mindset response. Avoid the challenge. Give up when it gets hard. Find a reason why this particular thing is not worth trying. Children praised for their effort, for working hard, for trying difficult things, tend to develop a growth mindset. Why? Because the praise that says you worked hard at that places the identity on the working. And working hard is not fixed. It is a choice, a behavior, something you can do in any situation. So when a challenge arrives, when something is hard, when the performance is not effortless, the child is not in crisis. The difficulty is not threatening. It is the environment in which working hard happens. And working hard is what they are praised for, what their identity is built on. So they work hard, and the working hard produces capability, which produces outcomes, which provides genuine evidence of ability that is not based on a fixed quality, but on a developed one. The praise shaped the response to difficulty. The response to difficulty shaped the development. The development shaped the life. If you were praised for what you were rather than what you did, you absorbed something from that praise. You absorbed the belief that what you are is what determines your outcomes. And that belief, once absorbed, looks like reality, but it was installed. And what was installed can be updated. Here is something about the growth mindset that most people misunderstand. The growth mindset does not say that everyone can do everything. It does not say that effort alone produces results, regardless of circumstance. That natural variation does not exist. That starting points are irrelevant. That anyone who works hard enough can become anything they want. These are oversimplifications. The growth mindset says something more specific and more important. It says that what you are currently capable of is not the limit of what you can become capable of. Not that the limits do not exist, that they are further away than you think, and that the distance between you and them is not determined primarily by something fixed and given. It is determined primarily by what you do with your time and attention and effort. That is not the same as saying effort produces anything. It is saying that effort produces more than the fixed mindset believes it does, and that gap between what the fixed mindset believes effort can produce and what the growth mindset believes effort can produce is where most unrealized potential lives. Let us talk about the specific domain where the mindset matters most: relationships, because the fixed mindset does not only shape how people approach skills and challenges, it shapes how they approach other people. The fixed mindset in relationships says people are who they are. Relationships either work or they do not. If you have to work at it, maybe it was not meant to be. If the connection requires effort, maybe you are not compatible. This is one of the most destructive sets of beliefs available in any relationship, because all relationships require effort, not the effort of forcing something that does not fit, the effort of showing up honestly, of communicating when communication is difficult, of choosing to understand when misunderstanding is easier, of working through the friction that all genuine closeness eventually produces. The fixed mindset person, encountering this normal relational friction, interprets it as evidence about the relationship, as proof that something is fundamentally wrong, that they chose the wrong person, that the relationship is not what it should be, and the response is either to leave and try again with someone whose relationship will also eventually produce friction, or to stay but disengage, to protect themselves from the risk of further investment in something that might not be what they need. The growth mindset in relationships says something different. It says relationships are built, not found, not discovered, already complete, built through the specific, daily, unglamorous work of two people choosing each other in the ordinary moments, not just the significant ones, the small ones, where listening is harder than talking, where patience is harder than reactivity, where showing up as your actual self is harder than the curated version. The growth mindset person encounters relational friction and asks, what is this asking of us? What does this difficulty want us to develop? What skill in connection or communication or understanding is being called for here? And the answer to that question points toward the work that builds the relationship into something that could not have existed without the friction. Something real, built from the specific materials of two specific people navigating specific difficulties and choosing each other through them. That kind of relationship is not found. It is built, and the building is only attempted by the person who believes that building is possible. Here is something about the growth mindset in the specific context of intelligence, because this is where the fixed mindset runs deepest for most people. The belief that intelligence is something you have or you do not, that some people are smart and others are not, that the ceiling on your cognitive capability was set at some point you had no say in. This belief is one of the most well-researched and most definitively challenged areas in developmental psychology. Cognitive capability is not fixed. The research is clear. People who believe their intelligence can grow, who approach intellectual challenges with the orientation that working through them will make them smarter, develop measurably greater cognitive capabilities over time than people who believe their intelligence is set. Not because the belief creates ability out of nothing, because the belief determines the behavior. The person who believes intelligence can grow takes on intellectually challenging tasks, persists through difficulty, uses confusion as a signal to dig deeper rather than as evidence that this is beyond them, builds the neural architecture of understanding through the sustained engagement with difficult material. The person who believes intelligence is fixed takes on intellectually safe tasks, retreats from difficulty, uses confusion as evidence of their ceiling, builds nothing in the areas where the challenge would have produced growth. The belief shaped the behavior shaped the development shaped the capability. The mindset is prior to the intelligence, not separate from it. Now let us talk about what actually changes the mindset, not in theory, in practice, in the specific, daily, ordinary moments where the choice between the fixed and growth orientation is real. The first thing that changes it is catching the fixed mindset voice, because the fixed mindset does not announce itself. It arrives disguised as realism, as self-awareness, as the honest assessment of someone who is being practical rather than delusional. You are just not a math person. This kind of thing has never come naturally to you. Look at how easily other people do this. That tells you something. Maybe you should stick to what you are good at. These statements feel like wisdom. They are not wisdom. They are the fixed mindset maintaining its territory. Catching them requires a specific practice. When the internal voice says something about your ceiling, about what you are not built for, about the natural limit of your capability, notice it, not to argue with it, not to replace it immediately with something more positive. Just notice it. This is a fixed mindset thought. It is telling me that this is a ceiling. But ceilings are beliefs, not facts. Let me treat this this as a current state rather than a permanent one. That noticing is the interruption, the gap that allows a different response. The second thing that changes the mindset is reframing the relationship with difficulty. Most people experience difficulty as a signal that says, this is not for you, that you have reached the edge of your capability, that the appropriate response is retreat. The growth mindset reframe changes what difficulty signals. Difficulty is not a sign that you have reached the edge. It is a sign that you are at the growing edge, the place where the new capability is being built. Difficulty is the environment of development. You cannot develop in comfort. You can only develop at the place where what you currently have meets something that requires more than what you currently have. That meeting is uncomfortable. That discomfort is not evidence that this is wrong. It is evidence that this is the place where growth is actually happening, not the place to retreat from, the place to stay a little longer than feels comfortable, a little further than feels safe, a little more than the fixed mindset says is available. The third thing that changes the mindset is changing the language around effort and improvement. This is small. It is not a small change. The language shifts from yet. I am not good at this. I am not good at this yet. I cannot do this. I cannot do this yet. I have not figured this yet. I have not figured this out yet. The yet is not a lie. It is the growth mindset encoded in a single word. It acknowledges the current state without treating the current state as the final one. It opens the door that the fixed mindset closes. It positions the person as somewhere in a process rather than at the edge of a fixed capability. And language shapes thought. Thought shapes orientation, shapes behavior. Orientation shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. The yet is the first domino. Here is something about the growth mindset and the people around you, because the mindset does not operate in isolation. It is influenced constantly by the environment, by the people who surround you and what they believe about ability and effort, by the culture of the organization you are in and whether it rewards learning or only performance, by the relationships where you feel safe to be in the learning stage of something versus the relationships where only the mastered version of you is acceptable. The environments that support the growth mindset share specific qualities. They celebrate effort alongside outcome. They treat mistakes as information rather than verdicts. They expect improvement rather than immediate perfection. They make it safe to be in the beginning stage of something new. And the environments that undermine the growth mindset are equally recognizable, where only winning is valued, where anything less than mastery is evidence of inadequacy, where the talented people are celebrated and the struggling people are quietly identified as not having what it takes, where the message is, be good at this or do not be here. If you have spent significant time in the second kind of environment, the fixed mindset that environment installed is real. It is not imaginary. It was shaped by repeated experience in a place that rewarded fixed mindset thinking and punished growth mindset vulnerability. But environments can change, and even inside fixed mindset environments, the internal orientation is still a choice. A harder choice in those environments, but still a choice. Let us talk about what the growth mindset looks like when it has been genuinely internalized, not performed, lived. The person who has internalized the growth mindset does not spend significant energy managing how they are perceived, not because they are indifferent to other people's perceptions, because their identity is not riding on the current performance. They can be seen struggling, can acknowledge what they do not know, can ask for help without it threatening their sense of themselves, can be wrong and update their position without it feeling like a collapse. They can take on challenges that they are not sure they can meet, not because they are reckless, because the outcome of the challenge is not the measure of their worth. The measure of their worth is in the quality of their engagement, in whether they brought genuine effort, whether they stayed present with the difficulty, whether they used what the challenge taught them. That measure is entirely within their control. It does not depend on whether they won, only on whether they engaged honestly. And the person who can be measured by that standard can attempt almost anything, because almost anything is available to the person who is not afraid of finding out that it is harder than they thought. Here is something about success and the growth mindset that most people miss. The growth mindset does not make success more likely by making you more more talented. It makes success more likely by making you more persistent, and persistence, in almost every domain, is more predictive of eventual success than talent. Not always, not in every context, but with a reliability that talent cannot match, because talent without persistence plateaus. The naturally gifted person who encounters the first significant challenge and retreats, who protects the talent from the risk of exposure to difficulty, builds nothing beyond the gift they arrived with, and the world eventually produces challenges that exceed whatever was gifted. The less naturally gifted person who persists, who works through difficulty, who stays in the uncomfortable zone long enough for the zone to expand, builds something that the talent alone could not produce. Capability that was earned, understanding that was developed through struggle rather than given through gift. Resilience that was built through the experience of finding difficulty hard and continuing anyway. The growth mindset does not promise an easy path to success. It promises the only honest path, the one that runs through difficulty rather than around it, through the struggle rather than away from it, through the humility of being in the learning stage rather than the protection of never admitting you are still learning. That path is longer and harder and more honest, and it leads somewhere the protected path does not, to the version of yourself that was built rather than given, the version that knows it can handle difficulty because it has handled difficulty before. That knowledge, earned and tested and real, is worth more than any natural talent because it is yours, built from the specific material of your specific effort in your specific life, not given, not borrowed, built. Here is where we leave this, not with a reminder to think positively, not with an instruction to believe in yourself, with the honest truth about what the mindset actually is and what changing it actually requires. The mindset is a set of beliefs about what is possible for you, for people in general, for the relationship between effort and outcome, for what failure means and what difficulty signals. Those beliefs were not chosen. They were installed through experience, through the specific environments and relationships and moments that taught you something about what you were capable of and what you were not. And beliefs that were installed can be updated, not by deciding to believe something different, by providing new evidence that difficulty is survivable. That struggle is the environment of growth rather than the signal of a ceiling. That failure is information rather than identity. That the person you are capable of becoming is further along than the person you currently are. That evidence is provided by one thing: trying the hard thing, staying in the difficulty long enough for it to teach you something, failing and returning with what the failure taught, attempting what you are not sure you can do, and finding out through the attempt that you can do more than you thought. Each attempt adds to the record, and the record, built from genuine attempts in the direction of genuine growth, is what changes the belief, not from the outside, from the inside, from the lived experience of being someone who tried difficult things and developed through them. That experience, accumulated over time, produces the growth mindset, not as a philosophy, as a way of being, and that way of being changes everything it touches. Every challenge, every failure, every moment of difficulty that the fixed mindset would have turned into a reason to stop, the growth mindset turns them into the next step, because the next step is always available, as long as you have not decided that where you are is where the path ends. It does not end here. It is just the place you are standing right now. And right now, the next step is forward.